Welcome to the MindSoft podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan. The topic of this episode is reducing parental stress. And for this episode, I'm delighted to interview my guest and good friend, Peggy Zherdev, who is the director of the Wellness Center and the Social Support Services at the Boys and Girls Club in Malibu, California. Peggy, I am delighted to explore this topic with you. I've had firsthand experience of the positive impact in observing you with children, with families and parents. So I know your work and the quality of your work. So before we get started into the actual interview today and cover before that process, a brief article review, I'd like to take a few minutes and have you just share your professional background and your responsibilities.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be a part of this podcast. I think it's really important work that you're doing, so thank you. I have been working with families for quite some time in different capacities. I started out working for the WIC program, which focuses really on women, infants, and children and providing them support. I decided to seek additional work within that field. I started working in lactation. So I started working in hospitals and helping moms figure out how to nurse their babies. And one thing that kept consistently happening was noticing that attachment wasn't just about breastfeeding, or that it wasn't just about, taking care or how you were feeding your baby, but it was more about something that I noticed something was missing or something was happening that really made it difficult for moms, no matter how they were feeding their baby, to connect. So I first really came into this work learning about attachment and really wanting to understand attachment. And so that's really what's led me to really concentrate my efforts and work in family therapy, working with families, and the mother-child dyad or parent-child dyad. So I now working in schools, and I've been doing that work now for 3 years. I just had my work anniversary. And I really appreciate the work we do in schools because everyone has to go to school. There's adults there that are really helping to support families and children as teachers, as administrators. So it allows lots of different people to really be there to support a family. And when they come to us and they get connected to us or referred to us, it's really a great process to know that there's other people that have already been helping this family or trying to help the family. And so now it becomes our turn to support. We try to really focus on family efficacy and trying to really support families doing providing their family the parenting skills and that culturally might be there that have been passed down to them as through generations. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it needs a little support, and that's what we're there to help and guide parents through a strengths-based approach. So that's a little bit about how I came to be in this work. And I also have my MOM. I myself am a parent, so I have my own personal experience with different aspects of parenting and really having to navigate that. I have 2 older kids that are teens, and I also have a almost 8-year-old. So I have the kind of like the full spectrum or the full gamut of ages.
That's wonderful, Peggy. Thank you for sharing your background. A couple of things I want to highlight. You said started out with the focus on attachment, which is critical in our field, right, of care of families, and also family efficacy, which is empowering, and parental skills with a cultural humility to it to help and understand how families have really in their systems created parenting skills over a lifetime. So that's a great overview of a wonderful career that you've developed over the years, and congratulations on your 3rd year anniversary.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's get into a little bit of data as we normally do on the MindSoft podcast. So what I'm going to do, Peggy, is take a couple minutes here to go over a recent article that was released January of this year by the Pew Research Center. And the article, if anyone wants to look it up and see the article themselves, is titled Parenting in America Today, And the report provided some really profound data about the concerns of U.S. parents with children under 18 years of age. And so I want to just go through these several bullet points of what I pulled out of the article that I thought would be really provocative for our conversation and interview today. So let me just go through these now. And as I go through this, as for our listeners, I want you to listen as if we're speaking directly to you as a parent or a care provider of children, so you can really see how this specifically resonates for you and your family system. So number one, top priority of concern, 40% of parents are very worried about their children struggling with depression and anxiety. So 4 out of 10. Following, 35% are worried about their children being bullied. Bullying is still a really big issue now, and it comes in the form of in-person and also cyberbullying because of the technology that our children have access to. 28% are worried about their children being kidnapped or abducted. That's frightening. So that was in the top 3. 23% are afraid of their children having access or use of drugs and alcohol. And that's a common one amongst teenagers that we've seen for many years. Another 22% are concerned about their children becoming a victim of gunfire. School shootings are up, as we know, over the last 2 decades. There are shootings in public places that we're not expecting to see that happen. Another 16% are worried about their children experiencing teenage pregnancy. Again, that's been a common concern amongst teenagers for parents. And then final, 14% of U.S. parents are concerned about their children being detained or arrested by law enforcement, which is pretty shocking. That one surprised me a little bit to hear about that concern for parents with children under 18. Now, with all these noted concerns and stressors being valid and important for us to talk about, however, with the time that we're going to invest today, we're going to focus in this interview discussion with Peggy, and we're only going to cover the focus on the top 4 concerns. And I invite you all to listen again as if Peggy and I are speaking directly to you, like we're in the same room together with a group of parents or care providers, so that you can listen in and get some great gems of insight and perspective on how you can reduce some of your parental stress with some ideas and some recommendations that Peggy can offer from her background and experience. So with that, Peggy, let's go ahead and get started. And so I will ask you the question, and then I'm going to just give you the floor, and then we'll go from there. So with the first question I have for you, Peggy, is when you hear that statistic that about 40% of parents, 4 out of 10, are extremely or very worried about their children struggling with depression and anxiety, what comes to mind for you?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of parents feel the same way, right? It's really important for all of us to empathize as parents that this is a real concern. There's so many different aspects of our generation that are very different from even just one generation previously, right? So the level of use of technology is probably the number one, but also we have other things that are happening. Vaping is another big issue that we see at schools, and we have a lot of challenges when it comes to time, right? The use of our time as parents. So that can also create a lot of stress with parenting. And so that alone can add to the anxiety that we feel as parents, because if we're busy professionals, busy people working, busy doing other things as well, it's hard to really understand what's going on with our kids. It can become very challenging, right? So I think recognizing that that we're all feeling very much the same is one part of it, right? And then also, I feel like it's a really important time whenever I feel worried about anything to kind of take inventory. Where am I at? How are we doing as a family? How much time are we spending together? If we're really concerned about depression and anxiety, why are we concerned? What is that concern trying to tell us, right? Is it because our child is going through this, through puberty and the moodiness is there? And we're trying to figure out, is this moodiness that's temporary, or is this, needing more attention? So, really taking the time to understand where the family is at is really important. And so, once we have a chance to kind of emotionally regulate our heads around this issue and challenge, then we can kind of dive into what can we do, right? As parents, what we can have lots of conversations. We can try to really make our home a safe space and a safe haven for our kids. Hopefully not only in their room, right? But also in the living room, in the kitchen, around the dining room table, all of those being times when they can ask questions and it becomes more of a conversation versus something that they feel penalized for bringing up as a conversation, as a topic. I think it's really important. I know it can be really scary. My mantra on that information is not permission, right? When it comes to parenting, I think sometimes we think giving information is like saying, well, go ahead, do it. But in reality, it's really helping us to understand, first of all, what they think around that topic, whether it has to do with drugs, whether it has to do with substances. Alcohol use is also up, and we need to really, and that is around in our home. It's a legal substance. So for many of us, that might be something they do have access to. So we really need to find ways to take inventory of where we are as a family and how much connection are we having with our kids? How much time are we spending with them? And sometimes you have to make an active effort. Like I find myself throughout the day busy, working, doing things, reading, trying to really stay on top of what I need to as a professional in this field. But then I have to stop and say, wait a minute, I haven't spoken to my child, right? Or I haven't had a chance to really check in on them after school. Now that school, the kids are back to school. So it's really checking in. How was their day? Really finding words that you can connect to, right? Like, who did you hang out with? Or for my younger child, I ask her, who do you play with during lunch? And having those conversations really makes a difference to them. We really allow them to talk and we get to listen. And through those opportunities, we really help them feel heard. And I think many times kids that are struggling with depression and anxiety don't feel heard, don't feel that they matter sometimes. And it's like really trying to understand, where is this coming from? As a professional, as a parent, I also wonder, like, is this coming from home? Is this coming from school? What can we do? What can I do? How can I help support this? Also, as I mentioned earlier, really understanding that the school environment can also be something that you lean on. Find out, get involved at school. So many studies show that when you participate actively in your child's life, and especially at school, they do better. They do well, right? They see us there. They know that we participate. They know we know whatever teacher or counselor, and we have them available to us to email. We have them available to us to talk to reach out. If we have concerns, please be our eyes and ears during the school day for X reason, right? And having that collaboration can be really helpful for our anxiety or our worries and concerns, and help provide us at least some comfort when we know that they're in that type of school environment where we can connect with other administrators in the school system.
Wow, Peggy, you covered a lot of great gems. So I'm going to highlight a couple things I took note of. And that was great.
Sure.
First, the fact that you acknowledge that parents also need to check in with themselves to determine, are they going through some of those symptoms of depression and anxiety, because it's a really big responsibility to parent one, nonetheless, multiple children, and balance all that. Like, you live it and you do it every day. And then I want to hit on a couple of the things that I hope that our listeners check in on. You hit emotional regulation, right? Regulating your own emotion as a parent, recognizing that you need to take care of yourself, checking in with yourself, creating a safe space in the home for your children, not just their bedroom, right? Not going into the room, locking the door, getting on the gaming system, getting on their phone and feeling like that's the only place in the house that is allowed for them, that they're quarantined into their rooms. And then the other piece of the safe haven at home is that making sure you're also partnering outside the home, right? You mentioned schools with the teachers that appreciate when they get an email or they get check-ins, or you're showing up at school, you're showing up for your kids. They see mom or dad or care provider, grandpa, grandma, whoever it may be, who's in that parenting role is showing up at school and playing a role in their lives that matters. And so it shows them that, hey, as I talk to my clients about depression and anxiety, I like to describe it as that a depression kind of shows up as your mind is mind traveling to the past of some loss, some sadness about a loss. And anxiety is more of like it's a time travel to the future, the perceived threat that's coming, right? So you're never being present, but being present as a parent, as you said so eloquently, can make a big difference in your child's life.
Yes, I do agree so much that it's so important for us to really understand where are we at, because anxiety is very contagious, and it's really important for us to understand that if we allow our anxiety and our thoughts to run away with the worst case scenario, then that's also going to affect how they are dealing with their issues or challenges. And it's really important for them to see us as a consultant, as someone that they can lean on as they get older, right? Especially the teen years, because at that point, really, they only rely on us, and we may have opinions about things. They may not always do what we say, right? They are kind of testing their own ability to make decisions, but it's really important to keep that window of reason, or at least our reasoning, right, into their lives open. And it's really important for them to feel like, well, my mom really has maybe some good ideas. Let me find out what she has to say. And involving ourselves in their lives can be really important, but that only comes when they see us as a stable support as well.
I love that. All right, let's move on to the next question. So, Peggy, parents experiencing stress about their children being bullied 24/7 now in a world of smartphones and social media platforms. What is your experience in helping parents who struggle to protect their children from bullying and cyberbullying?
Mm-hmm. I think, really getting as much information on why this is an important topic. I think, yes, knowing that is the case on that, they are getting bullied and being worried about it isn't enough, right? Like, we need to take action. And many times, especially if you're considering a phone, right? So we'll talk about it in two phases, right? Like the consideration phase of getting a phone for your child, or are they ready for a child, really knowing and understanding, because the phone is where it becomes a 24-hour opportunity for bullies to follow them at home, follow them, during practice, to follow them everywhere in a car ride, right? So that's one aspect that we can control when we're making a decision about whether our child is ready to have a phone, right? Once they have a phone, once that's happened already, and whether or not they were ready, if they are being bullied, I think it's really important for us to find out what's going on, to again, right, rely on the connection that we have with our child and a relationship that we have with them, for them to really open up and tell us, hopefully, what's going on, right? Even if it means something they did could mean they're going to get in trouble, right? I think that's really important. And maybe not reacting to that aspect of it first, but really thinking about the safety and what's happening first, right? Versus the consequence of their actions, right? Because that's happening. They know they did something, and they're in the midst of dealing with someone who's bullying them. They've shared their contact information, or they sent a picture or something that wasn't okay. And now they're dealing with the consequences. And we really, at that point, need to be there as a resource to them on what to do. And many times, we need to find out, how have they been accessing that? We sometimes think that there's a safety net in having, whether it's apps, right, that help us. Bark is one of them. Apple has their own, to limit or monitor what they're doing. Kids know how to get around that. If they really want to get into an app that we are not approving of, they will get creative. And I won't share that now because, we don't want to add to what's out there already. But if you Google how to get around whatever it is, whatever system, the kids know to search for things. So we really need to be prepared. Are we monitoring, or are we over monitoring that they are finding that they have to go to the extremes, right? And we know our kids best. We know if they are being honest with us and when they're not, right? And so we, at this point, at a certain point, once they get to a certain age, we really are trying to help them, the kids, to be honest with us, right, as much as possible, and not feel like they have to sneak or use certain things that are out there. Again, I don't want to mention what my techie husband mentioned to me, the things that are out there, and it's pretty scary that they can just get around all of it and be very creative. But that's why that creativity, we need to know about it so that they're utilizing it for good versus, things that they are wanting to do without us knowing. And bullying in particular, right? Kind of going back to that theme, it's really important for us to also know our resources, get in touch with the school. If it's a student at the school, finding out what the school policies are around all of that. How can we help support our child through all of those resources? If it's happening through other means, if it's happening through an app, it's an anonymous user we don't know personally, then it's really exploring, like, is it time, right, with our child to maybe not use that app? Is it even age appropriate for them to have it, right? Many times they will want TikTok, or Snapchat, but there's so many things that come with those two apps in particular, that their location can be tracked. And I know further down in our conversation, we're going to talk a little bit more about safety, but that, knowing and being aware of all of that is really important as parents, because sometimes we're like, it's a funny app, Snapchat, they make the funny pictures and all of the funny videos, but there's also another side to it that we need to be aware of, that we really need to know, our children, are they really ready for that app or for that level of access to the internet? And I think, when we decide that with our child too, and we have buy-in about why this is not, safe, or why it can be very dangerous, that it's really important for us to have those conversations early on. It may be hard. It may mean we're putting the phone away for a while just because as a safety precaution, but they'll know and they'll understand, especially if we're clear about the reasons, if we're firm about them. That also means making sure that both parents, or however many adults are in this child's life, are all on the same page. If there's two households, hopefully having good communication with the other parent is really important, because we want to all be on the same page. If one parent is more, extreme or more strict about things, and the other one is just kind of laissez-faire, then we know what's going to happen, right? The triangulation, the avoiding the one parent who we know is more strict in order to get what we want. So the level of access is really important when it comes to prevention of bullying. Once they're there, it's really important to seek out those resources and, talk to other parents who've gone through it, and, making sure that your support system is there, because it can be really challenging as a parent to see this happen, and knowing that you are not alone, you're not the first to have this happen, is really important too, as well, right? As you're going through the process of supporting your child to find a way out of that situation, right? Whether it's getting rid of the app, getting rid of something, putting the phone away for a while. That's one aspect of it. If it's happening in person at school, it's really important for the school to be involved and to be aware, because there are certain things that the schools will take action on. They will try to really make sure. There are systems like restorative practices in schools right now that can be really helpful, and maybe even prevent this child from bullying other children in the future. And that resource in particular is really important, because it is more, as the name says, right, more restorative. Many times we know that bullies are themselves bullied, right? So what's happening in this child's life that they are resorting to behaving this way with other kids is really an important question to find out. There are resources and people that are trained in schools to provide this level of support so that the kids really resolve what's happening. If we feed into the anxiety around bullying and that bully's behavior and that child, we are then can be contributing negatively. We really want to help support your child needs that support to be also to feel competent, to feel like they can figure things out and problem solve a little bit on their own, especially when it comes to social skills with other kids. And not that I'm saying that, let the bully be a bully around the child. Absolutely not. You need to tap into those resources so that they can support you through the schools.
Wow. So you covered a lot of great things. So I want to just hit again so as others are listening, because this is really great information.
Sure.
So for the cyberbullying, I love the steps of making sure your child has the readiness and you as a parent have the readiness for them to have access to even a phone or device and what that means for certain applications that they might use that are age appropriate. Monitoring, having a mindful awareness of what they're using and how they're using it and who they're connecting with online. The support, right? When something comes up that, they have you as a support and they don't have to be ashamed, or if they've done some things, if they've posted something that's a little more provocative or controversial, that they can come to you as a parent and know that they won't be judged by the fact that they made a mistake or they just had an impulse. And I also really appreciate, because I see this often, children sometimes have multiple households. So they might have co-parentings that are situations where they may have a parent who are living apart or through divorce or separation, or just that's the way their family system is set up. And so making sure that the parents are being collaborative and not competitive in how they go about working with the child to protect them from bullying. And then for the on-campus at school, I've seen you do some great work and really be an expert with the restorative practices. And I think that that's something that's not as well known. So I want all of you who are listening as a parent, if your child is experiencing bullying at school, or let's say a sporting a group or activity, that you know that there are resources like that. The restorative practice is really powerful. And that's one of the ways you can tap into the school faculty and administration to ask for help. You're not alone. There are people that are there to help your child and help you. So just great coverage all the way around, which leads right into nicely to my next question for you, Peggy, which is, as you were talking about safety, I want to transition to the fact that parents are also dealing with a really stressful and worrisome and uncomfortable reality that we live in a time where kidnapping, abduction is a sad reality that we have to face as parents. And it brings up the uncomfortable topic of child human trafficking as a real threat for many parents that are worried about that. And so, I'd want to just also open that door a little bit and have you talk to. I know it's pretty controversial, but it's needed that parents are stressed about this. What are some protective measures that parents can take to enhance the safety, overall safety of their children from those type of threats?
Well, I think it's very similar to how we manage or approach bullying, right? And the readiness for a device, because that's really what we're talking about. The largest worry, right, that we have around that, because kids get lured through apps, through conversations, through Messenger, even before AIM back in the day, right? So anything that provided communication directly with kids or with even just, teenagers is really important to monitor for, are they ready for that level of access? Our child, right? And many times the answer is no, right? Puberty is a game changer many times. And even during that time frame, there's so many things happening. Do we really want to add something else being in another element that they need to deal with? And letting our kids be kids is really important. So yes, phones are great. Many times people opt to have just a flip phone that it only allows you to make calls on. Because that's really the one aspect of phones that is helpful for parents. But the tracking devices, all of the things that apps provide, right? The find my location or share your location, those things, if they're on, then other people know where your child is. Other people, can have access, and we really want to limit that risk, right? That's one part of it. The other part is really knowing who our kids are hanging out with, right? Are they kids that are similar age, or are they older? What draws them to the older crowd, if that's the case? Many times it's, if they have access to substances, and that's another challenge too, in a separate conversation. But, sometimes that's what they're seeking out when they are, especially because that requires a handoff of some sort when they're on apps. And really knowing who our kids are interacting, what are they doing? If we are aware that substances are an issue, we need to address it right away, and even find a way to keep them closer to us, right? And have a closer ear to what's going on in their lives, that they are using substances. We know that many times that can be used as a coping mechanism. So if there's something that's causing them to draw to substances, and then they're seeking it through online websites, or people that they meet online, because unfortunately apps and many times those tags or the hashtags are actually used inappropriately, and so they create an opportunity for kids to connect with others who have access to substances. And that's part of the issue that's been found, right? So we know that is another challenge that the kids, or another avenue of a way that kids connect in person with others for substances. Because many times our kids are aware of, oh, I want to meet you, or come and meet me here, and they're more aware of what that is, right? That's like someone luring you in. You and I were taught the whole, if someone asks you about having candy or puppies, right? Like, and coming and checking them out of the van, we know to stay away from that person. But unfortunately, people who are grooming are very good at what they do, especially when it is switching gears away from maybe substances, but also now human trafficking. They know how to, make sure that your child gets attention. Maybe they're doing something, they're providing some kind of safe space for the child, but safe from what, right? So for us to know and make sure that our home is safe can be a preventive factor that we can use, right? If our kids are feeling loved and cared for at home, it's harder for someone to come in and try their grooming aspects that exist, that they hopefully will fail, right? If we are providing as much as possible at home versus them seeking it out online, or seeking it out through others, in person as well. So those are just some initial thoughts on that. Obviously the worries are, again, something that we need to consider. What is it that we're worried about? What are these worries trying to tell us? Do we think that our child is potentially at risk, our specific child, right? Because in general, parents, yes, percentages wise, yes, we are all concerned. But when it comes to knowing our particular child, what do we think that their level of potential risk is? So knowing who they hang out with, knowing what they're up to, right? If they're using substances, knowing that we need to be even more involved in their lives is really key, and providing a framework, right? Are they ready for that device? Again, having that conversation, and maybe they're not, and maybe it's time, not going to be time until after their puberty phase is kind of passed, and maybe they're going to be 14 when they get an actual smartphone. But in the meantime, maybe they have a flip phone, right? So, parents know their child best, and whether they're ready for what they get exposed through on the internet. So,
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment about who they're in contact with, because that speaks universally to in person, their friend group, their network of associates, but also online. And when you were talking about this in terms of making sure that their home is safe, I love that point you call out, that as children feel like they're loved, that they're not missing something, in a sense of a connection with their family members and the siblings and their parents and their extended family, then it's less of a risk for them to be allured and groomed by someone who's giving them that much desired attention that they're looking for. And, and it comes in so many forms now, Peggy. It comes in gaming systems now. Kids can play or, games with someone across the country or even out of the US, territory. They can play games online at any point in time of the day. You have brand ambassadors now, like you said, the hashtags. Oh, you're a good looking kid, or you're cool, or I liked your video. Would you like to, be a brand ambassador and get free stuff? I can send you. And so I've heard this come up now as another way of children being lured, and putting parents on alert, right? So your points hit home really well, is that continuing as parents, checking the readiness of your child and recognizing, like you said, puberty and the brain, as we know, doesn't fully develop until about 25 years of age, the executive function of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. So kids are working off a lot of their instinctive impulses and their adventurous spirits, which makes them kids, which is a wonderful part of their life journey. But we got to protect them from the risks that come with that as well. Yeah.
That they're
Yeah.
taking healthy risks, right? Like
Mhm.
good, that they're the risk of going across the country to a university, or
Mhm.
that the risks that they're taking are helping them become a better human, right? As they grow, is really key. Yeah. And not anything that's going to hurt them, or that they're coping, that they're using to cope with something that's
Mhm.
happening. Yeah. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
important.
All right. So the final prepared question I have, and then I'll have a final wrap up question for you. This article that I referenced at the beginning of our discussion reported that 23% of parents, and you talked on this a little bit, are worried about the increasing risk associated with children having easier access and to alcohol and drugs, ranging from anything from vaping is pretty common now, to up to the risk of opiates. That's pretty terrifying. And so I wanted to ask you, how would you advise parents on identifying some of the warning signs to protect their children from being exposed to, risky behavior with the use of alcohol or other drug influences?
So it's out there. The kids are exposed many times. So it's really helping your child understand their why, of why they're not going to do something, is really key. And talking about it early on, not waiting until it's happening, but actually you really talking to them maybe when they're about 9, 10. If you find that it's already appropriate for them to understand at their level, right? Having those conversations that are age appropriate are really key early on, because by the time they're in middle school, they already know. They know that vaping, people vape, they see it, they know what drugs are, they know what the smell is, they know that pills exist and that people use them for, reasons that are not medically, necessary. So they are aware of things, and it's really important for them to understand the family values, the reasons why we don't do certain things, which also then means we have to be a really good example. We at home have to then really, strive to understand, our level of use of even alcohol, right? And what
Mhm.
it does to us, because our kids really are a reflection. I know many of us don't want to, believe it, or are really like hesitant sometimes to, like, oh no, our kids don't, they're not going to do it goes back to the do what I say and not what I do, right? Or is that the expression? I'm confusing it now. But basically, it's doing what I say and not what I do it's going to backfire on us. And it can be really hard for us to really eliminate those things. I think a lot of us, there is a lot of use among adults as well for pain medication. And that seems to be the one that kids have the most access to. And it's a prescribed medication. Helping them understand that not all medication needs to be taken because it's prescribed, right? We need to have a reason. We need to make sure to follow what the doctor says and use those medications the way they're supposed to be utilized, and then stop them when they need to be stopped. And being open about it is
Mhm.
really important, because if something does happen, if they start to use something that then becomes a problem, they're more likely to talk to you about it and say, Mom, I have a problem with this, or Dad, I have a problem with this, or parent, or adult that I trust, I have a problem with this and I need help. And doing so earlier on is helpful, and a big key to making sure that our kids, at least if that happens to them, they're able to pull out of it earlier on.
That's great. I want to just reiterate what you said that just almost knocked me
Sure.
over. Understand their why. Wow, that's great. And I think about uh, personally growing up, my mother would always talk about how stay away from drugs because it could hurt your brain and your brain cells. And that was very scientific for me, and thinking that, oh, I don't want to lose any brain cells because that's important. And I want to go to college
Yeah.
and I want to do all these things. And so that was kind of my why. So helping each one of their children understand their why, and also responsibly appreciating how their parents are showing up. I think that's another point you called out, is that, parents are under a lot of stress, and sometimes they find themselves having a glass of wine after a long week, at home, and responsibly having a beverage of some type in the household, and the kids see that. And so it becomes normalized, but making sure that we're not, to your point, just saying, do as I say, not as I do, but helping our children understand what's going on when they see the use of prescribed medications or any kind of alcohol beverages in the household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The response, doing things responsibly is what we're trying to give our kids as a life skill. Right? And so that's really important for us to mirror for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so before I go into my last question, I also want to just reiterate that as we're speaking to this, the tone of this is consistent, that we're showing the compassion for parents, right? Parents, you have a big responsibility. It's a labor of love and responsibility that comes with a lot of complexity and uncertainty. And so I hope, as we have parents and care providers of children listening in, know that you're probably not getting as much credit as you deserve for what you're doing right. And so just continue to acknowledge your strengths and the things that you're doing great, and take advantage of what you're hearing in this episode to just add to the things you're already doing really well. So I just wanted to make that point, because I know the work and responsibility of being a parent is a really wonderful, but also sometimes challenging experience for us all. And with that, my final question for you, Peggy, is, you get to see a lot, right, in your work. And so what other emerging parenting issues do you believe parents should be mindful of?
I think the one that we probably aren't as aware of is the rampant use of vaping. I think that's one to
Mm,
be really aware of. What does it look like? Many parents don't even know what it looks like, vape pen. So it's really important to at least stay in the know. Make those efforts to read about it, hear about it. Even you don't have to agree, obviously, with what it is, but at least knowing what it is will help you be more aware of what your kids are being exposed to and what at school. Unfortunately, a lot of it is at school or around other people, and it's really important just to be in the know. I think it's also really important for us to understand that our mental health is really important to take care of, because the stigma is still the biggest challenge and the biggest hurdle that we have to deal with in helping our kids. And so the more that kids see us accessing mental health as a resource, as a support, the more they see us doing healthy coping activities or stress relieving activities, the more likely they are to lean on that as well. And early on, we can expose them to, right? And understanding this is how we do things. This is when we're upset or frustrated, and in a very loving. And unfortunately, too many times it doesn't happen that way because we ourselves, right, haven't taken a chance, especially with our first child. We haven't had a chance to really think about what was our parent, how were we parented? How were
mm,
we supported or not supported? Do we want to do things similarly or not? And really understanding where our parenting style is coming from. Do we and then also seeking support or resources out there for if we want to change it. And it's okay to do that. And knowing that you can seek those supports, knowing that we're human, we're all going to make mistakes as parents, is really key early on, because the relationship and the connection that we have our kids is so key to everything we've discussed today, that if we don't have that, it's going to be, yes, there is worry. Then I worry for your children or for anyone's children out there when they don't have those relationships at home that matter so much to them. I don't think we give ourselves, like you said, credit, even that what we do as parents is so important to our children's lives, and helps them, moving forward in life and becoming the adults that we need them to be, right? That they need to be in this society that is struggling. There's so many challenges outside of our family bubble, outside of our own little communities, that they are going to have to deal with or understand or accept and acknowledge that they are challenges. So it's really important to have that relationship, that our relationship with them is so super, super important and really valuable to them, and it really matters. And it's scary to think of it that way,
Mhm.
but it's also really important to know that there's support and resources out there. And the key ingredient to that is love. And so many times I hear parents really not being compassionate to themselves. Practicing that self-compassion is so important for our own ability to then practice compassion towards our kids and what they're dealing with, to practice compassion with our partner, and how hard it can be as a co-parent in the home or in two separate homes. And it's really important for us to learn what self-compassion is for ourselves as we're going through the process, to help our kids really learn to be compassionate for themselves as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderfully said. Wonderfully said. Take care of yourself as a parent, and your children benefit as well. So I want to transition to the wrap up by starting first and foremost, Peggy, to say just thank you, my dear friend, for sharing excellent recommendations, valuable insights, professional experience that you bring to this. Not only as you say, you have your MOM, you're a mom, and you're a professional, right? That you bring to this. And I want to thank you for, just really speaking to the importance of parents also taking care of themselves as they're dealing with stress of being parents, and that role and the responsibilities altogether. So for all of the listeners of this MindSoft podcast episode, I hope that this provides you some great insights and some beginning of building on your great parenting capabilities and expanding what you can do as a parent and dealing with some of these stressors we discussed today. And this was an invaluable investment of time for you in learning more about how you as a parent can reduce the stress while parenting with love, as she said, as Peggy said, providing safety, overall wellness, and development of your children as wonderful human beings that they can be in their future. And so I invite all of the listeners to subscribe to this podcast on your chosen platform, and check us out on the MindSolve YouTube channel as well to stay up to date with upcoming episodes. And please share this podcast with others you believe could benefit from this information, other parents who are experiencing some of these stressors that you're facing. And ultimately, be mindful and continue to choose joy. Thank you.